Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Other Side of Addiction podcast. As you guys know, I'm your host, Al Richards, and I had this all set up, and now it seems like the camera's off a little bit. All right, there we go. So anyway, hey, we got a really good show for you guys today. We're going to be talking about the key core beliefs, unlocking the heart of happiness, health, and trauma care. And as the majority of our listeners know, this definitely falls underneath the addiction umbrella, because there are so many of us that suffer from that. And even those who are not battling addiction or in long-term recovery, I think every single one of us have fallen underneath one of these categories. I know I have. And I know the majority of the people that I know and hang out with have also fallen under one of these categories. So our guest today is Gary Otis. And just so you guys know a little bit about Gary, he's a licensed clinical mental health counselor, a clinical mental health specialist, trauma leadership development, and strategic planning consultant. And Gray and I happened to be invited to a Utah substance use and mental health advisory board. And they gave me a chance to get up and introduce myself at the end. And Gary, or Gray, you were on the other end, right, on the Zoom. Yeah. And Elizabeth put my information up there, and Gray reached out to me, and I think we had a phone call for about 40 minutes or so, maybe a half hour, something like that, like a week after. And
good conversation.
Here he is on the show. So without further ado, Gary, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Well, it's good to be with you, Al.
Oh, yeah.
Appreciate the work that you've done to create this podcast, talking about that you've been doing this for 2.5 years, and a couple of podcasts a week. It's amazing. I don't know how you have the internet.
Well, it's amazing where I even find the time, right? Because I work like 2 jobs, and then I do all this stuff too. And however, this is my baby right here. A lot of times, and our listeners know us, sometimes I get very emotional on the show because this really is my baby. And I'm still shocked that it's 2.5 years, to be honest with you. But I'm very grateful because it's everyone out there, those listeners, people like yourself who want to come on the show. You guys are the ones that's making it possible. I just sit here and talk and listen. So really, it's our sponsors and our guests and our listeners that's making the show possible.
Well, you can tell your passion is here.
Oh yeah, it's definitely
that makes the difference.
Well, thank you. So right before the show, we were talking about the key core beliefs, and you were showing me this sphere of stuff. What got you to want to go this direction? I mean, when you went into this profession, did you think that this is exactly where you were going to take it?
No.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I was telling you that I had a former career as an Army officer, and I got out and tried to figure out what I was going to do when I grew up. And I went back to school and became a clinical mental health counselor. And I just have enjoyed the field immensely. But I did not think I was going to go into addictions and compulsive behaviors, which is exactly where I went. And the other area that was of interest to me very early on in my career was trauma. And I was being trained in what is referred to as EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, for trauma resolution. And I was talking with one of my trainers, and I said, it seems to me like this applies to almost everything in the mental illness field. And she said, I don't know why I wouldn't use it. It's so effective. Shortly thereafter, I became involved first as a therapist and then as an executive director for a residential treatment facility for drug and alcohol recovery, 30, 60-day type of program.
Yeah.
And what we realized very quickly is that there wasn't an exception to the rule, that if somebody really had what we would call a diagnosable addiction or a compulsive behavior pattern, there's always something behind it. And it's always trauma, or what we refer to as chronic distress. And so I always distinguish it. Trauma basically is something that's a big traumatic event. We all know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
But chronic distress is a little bit more subtle. So, for example, we'd find guys that were going through the program that they grew up in a family with super high expectations and quite a bit of critical judgment. Well, you wouldn't think that that was traumatic, and it doesn't meet the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, but it still created a real stress on them. And at some point, they turned to something to relieve that stress. And it was almost always some kind of substance that would help them get away from that stress for a while or that trauma. And then they would get a sense that, oh, well, I've got to deal with this now. And that starts to create, as you well know, that trap that we're stuck. There's nothing I can do about it. And the interesting thing from my vantage point was that they didn't realize it was related to this trauma or chronic distress that they'd had before. They never connected the dots.
Right.
And to be honest with you, I didn't either to start out with. But once I started to get the idea that there's something behind, a drug addiction or an addiction to alcohol, or I would say any kind of compulsive behavior that's repetitive and is not helpful, lo and behold, we see it every single time. And so I spent the majority of my practice working with these individuals. I did a lot of group work, and I love that, but I did a lot of individual work as well, and most of it was focused on trauma resolution. And the good news is today we were just talking about a number of different tools that people can really take care of anything that has been a problem for them in the past. And that to me is really exciting.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine it is. And, it's crazy because a lot of the guests that I have interviewed, they said exactly what you just said, Greg, that they knew something was wrong. They just did not know what it was. Right. All they knew is the first time they took a drink of that beer or the whiskey or wine, whatever it may be, or they took a hit of acid or snorted a line of cocaine or whatever it was, all of a sudden that stuff just went away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you have a cut, you do everything you can to stop your finger or the cut from throbbing and aching, right? And that's pretty much what we do as individuals, as those who have battled addiction and that to, and then it grabs you before you know it.
Yeah.
It has you. And then, like you said, where do you go from there? Because now you don't know how to, I like to call them eagle talons because they're so sharp and they dig so deep.
Right in.
I mean, you can pop one out, but you still got others that are just there. And as soon as you get one out, another one goes back in. Yeah. And we've talked about on the show many times too, of the stigma of addiction. I'm just as guilty. People don't realize what these individuals have gone through in their life. And that's why they've fallen back. Because the addiction is just the Band-Aid, as you know.
Yes. Yeah, it's the coping mechanism that doesn't work. It works for a while.
Oh, yeah.
That's the power of the addiction. It works for X number of minutes or maybe even an hour or two.
Yeah.
But then you're right back with those talons that are sticking into you. And, as far as I'm concerned, they're always in our heart. It's all emotions and connected with things that, like I said, most people don't quite understand that that's why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then they get down on themselves or their neighbors or family members. Well, why can't you just give this up? And the answer is you can't give it up because that underlying hurt is still there. Mm-hmm. And we're still going to have to try and get rid of that pain, that suffering, that misery that's associated with it. And we know something that works every single time for a while.
Yeah.
And then we're right back to this completely hopeless state and not recognizing how these things are all come together. And as I worked with individuals, it was just, we were talking about your passion. My passion as well was, as it is for you, to see kind of the light come on and the light come from within.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
And the hope is restored.
See, that gave me goosebumps.
Yeah. And then, you have to pay attention to all of the other stuff. Yeah. You still got to do your 12 steps or whatever else you're using as your support. You do need the support community. There's no question about that. It's not just this or that, but it is about the fact that if you don't take care of that trauma, that chronic distress, then all of the other things are kind of up at a higher level. And you never get down to where those talons are really grabbing into your heart and your spirit. By converse, once people start to say, wait a minute, what is afflicting me really is not the substance. but the hurt underneath the substance. And I can do something about that. I can work through that. Then it becomes something that's a joy to behold. And seeing people that have been under substance use afflictions for 30 years, let alone 5 years, but I remember one guy that I just grew to love. I love them all. I can't help myself.
Yeah.
But and we were dealing with both men and women, but this guy had lost everything. His job, his family, his relationships with his children were all gone. And to see that there was, really for his vantage point in his 50s, there was no hope for him. Well, the hope came, the light came. He was able to work through some of those very early problems that occurred even before he was married.
Oh.
And then all of a sudden he started to shift, and he became this source of inspiration for all of us, for the guys and gals that were in the program, for me and my fellow therapists, the people that were working with him. And you could tell that he was never going back. He knew where he was going, and he was never going to go back. And he restored relationships with his ex-wife. They're not going to get married again, but
Still the relationships there,
the
right?
relationships there. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously they had children together. His 3 children came back in relationship with their dad for the first time in years. And, it was just, well, the operative word is joy.
Yeah.
Can't beat that.
Oh, heck no. And I can imagine how you feel as an individual to see that shift and that change in someone,
Yeah.
knowing that basically it's not that you did it, you just gave them the right tools.
Precisely.
They had to do it themselves, as we know, right? And as our listeners know, those that are battling addiction or in long-term recovery, it's all your choice. You decide which direction you're going to go. However, when you are given the right tools, it sure makes a difference. There's a saying I used to use every once in a while that if you don't heal with what cut you, you will bleed on those. No, if you don't heal what hurt you, you will bleed on those who didn't cut you. And it's so true, because it has to come within.
And that's the key point from our vantage point. I was working with a couple of colleagues, a psychologist and a marriage and family therapist, and we'd all become trauma specialists because we feel like it's so important for almost everybody. Everybody's going to experience either chronic distress and or trauma in their lives.
Yeah.
And they need the tools. It's just what you're talking about. I always like to use the analogy. No doctor ever healed a broken bone. All the doctor did was set the bone in the right place so it could heal itself. And what you said a few moments ago is exactly right. It's not me. It's just allowing certain things to shift a little bit. So now things are in place so that the person can heal themselves. And, I believe in a higher power, so I certainly believe that that's important.
You must have just been reading my mind, because that's what I was going to say next. Yeah. Right.
But it's not me.
Yeah.
It's the individuals. But what a real delight it is to do that. Well, as these 2 colleagues and I were looking at trauma in a broader context, but also specifically in terms of substance use issues, we found one thing that was in common with everybody who had gone through those experiences. And that was that their beliefs about themselves had changed from positive to negative. And so what we started to look at, particularly in the context of EMDR, was the shift of what they call positive and negative cognitions, and what we call the shift from negative core beliefs to positive core beliefs. And that's what subsequently resulted in a book and a lot of additional looking and researching to understand how that when we saw trauma symptoms go away, for example, real post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. The classic example was a study of Vietnam veterans 15 years after the war was gone, 20 years after the war was gone, and they're still suffering from these symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. They're pretty doggone easily to identify. Once they changed their perceptions about themselves, everything else started to fall in line. It's not a magic wand and it's not a panacea, but we do believe it is the underlying issue that we do have to address. And as well as everybody I've ever had experience, including myself, that we have these negative beliefs about ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we beat ourselves up. I'm a bum. I'm a dummy. I'm stupid. I have no willpower. I can't do this. I'm helpless in the face of, for example, a substance. And all of those beliefs are inaccurate. And so what we need to do is say, let's take a look at those beliefs. Let's shift them to more positive, constructive, and the operative word we use is accurate beliefs about ourselves. And once that happens, everything else starts to line up in a much better way.
Yeah. Yeah. When you start paying attention of your feelings and your thoughts, right? I think that creates a huge shift. And again, it doesn't happen overnight. And like you said, there's no magic wand.
Yeah.
Because you didn't fall into addiction within 24 hours.
No.
Or a week or a month. It took that time. It's
Yeah.
going to take that time to get out and also to work on ourselves, to realize, and also you help people basically dig that sliver out that's been irritating the crap out of it.
Yeah.
Even though we know what a sliver is, but for a lot of people, they don't know that sliver's there. They just know there's something very painful that's happening. I don't know what to do to get rid of it.
Yeah. And the really good news about all of this, the old idea was it takes 21 days to change a habit.
Yeah.
It takes about 7 weeks to change a belief. 7
Oh,
weeks
okay.
of consistently focusing on changing a belief about yourself. And there's another piece that I really like about it. You're right. The addiction didn't happen overnight, but the beliefs start to shift in about 3 weeks. And then they start to see, oh, I can see myself differently, constructively, positively, and accurately. And when that starts to happen, it's pretty amazing what people can start to do. They quit. I have in my office a little baseball bat. It's about this long, but it's like a baseball bat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sits up on the top of a bookcase. Most people don't ever recognize it's there. But, somebody will come in my office for the first time, and it can be a compulsive behavior. It can be an out and out addiction. It can be depression. It can be anxiety. It can be PTSD. And within 15 minutes to a half an hour, they're already starting to talk negatively about themselves. And I said, well, what do you do about that? And they keep going on about, well, doggone it. Says, it sounds to me like you beat yourself up. And she said, yeah. I said, how often do you beat yourself up? Oh, all of the time, every day, many times. And so about that point, I stand up, get on the top of my bookcase, pull down my bat, and I said, listen, it would be a whole lot better for you if you took this bat and beat yourself up than it is to emotionally and mentally beat yourself up. If you hit yourself with the bat, it would hurt, and you might even get a bruise, but at least you knew what was going on there. With you beating yourself up mentally and emotionally because of your beliefs about yourself, then you're stuck with that forever. And it's kind of, some people see this as a form of self-punishment. Well, if I punish myself enough, beat myself up enough, then somehow I'll get above it. But it never works. And again, that's just kind of a coping mechanism that we all resorted to. I don't know anybody that doesn't beat themselves up every once in a while.
Yeah.
But the healthier people, A, recognize it, B, stop it, move into something positive, and then act on that in a consistent fashion. And then those negative core beliefs go away. And that's the way we deal with negative core beliefs. Understand, in other words, recognize it. Understand what is that really true, or is there something that's more accurate? Then do something about it, and then act in that context to practice it. I always like to say, that's what we learned how to do everything.
Exactly right. Yeah.
From the time that, I always talk about the little kids that are learning how to walk. I've never met anybody that remembers how they learned how to walk.
No, and did we give up? Apparently not, because we're still walking around, right?
And how many mistakes did we make? Probably in the thousands. Okay, but we didn't give up. We kept coming back to, I can do this. They had a vision that they're seeing their older siblings or others walk. I can do this too. And they stumble through it, but they keep coming back and practice. Well, learning how to play a musical instrument, learning how to ride a bike, learning how to drive a car. It's the same thing. And we start out with, I use sometimes the multiplication tables. There was a time when all of us didn't know our multiplication tables. We didn't know what 12 times 3 was.
Mhm.
But what happened was we learned a little bit about addition and subtraction. And then the next thing that was introduced to us was multiplication. At that point, we would say, I'm helpless. I can't do that. I'm stupid. I can't do that. Other people can do that. It's clear, but I can't do that.
Right.
But we learned and opened ourselves up to saying, but I want to learn how to do this and I want to figure this out. And oh, by the way, I've got a teacher that wants to help me understand this. And she's helping me explain that multiplication is kind of multiple additions.
Mhm.
Okay. And I started to say, oh, I think maybe I can get this. Maybe I'm not stupid after all. Now, we didn't think that, of course. Some of us were saying, I can hardly wait to learn all this.
Right.
But we had to learn it, get ourselves exposed to it, and then act on it. Teacher gave us some homework. So what did we do? We went home and practiced it.
I went home and played.
Well,
No lie.
I've done that too.
Right. But yes, you're right. You're 100% right.
Yeah. So what we're finding is that these negative core beliefs are always tied to anxiety, depression, substance use, compulsive behavior, self-harm, every single time. And we need to do all of the things to support ourselves getting out of those kinds of repetitive behaviors. But we've also got to deal with what's underlying each and every one of them. And that is the beliefs, the negative self-talk that we constantly are kind of going after ourselves with.
Yeah. Question for you. So I've read a lot of self-help books, right? And we were talking to the show in 2009. That's when my life changed.
Yeah.
And it was something bad that happened in my life, which a lot of our listeners know. I lost my job because of my cocaine use and things like that. However, it ended up being a blessing, right? Because I got to figure out I wasn't the person who I thought I was. I ended up working my butt off to become a whole different type of individual.
Mhm.
When it comes to these feelings, the trauma, depression, and even personally here lately, I've got some personal issues that's going on. And there's some days I have no motivation, which is not like me. And I have come to recognize those days. I have learned through a lot of my guests and also with reading certain books, it's okay to feel the way that you're feeling.
Yes.
Allow those emotions to come in. However, don't keep your foot in the mud too long because it'll finally suck your shoe off, right? You'll be stuck there.
Yeah.
Right. So it's okay to feel these emotions and feel that, because we're going to do it the rest of our lives, even though you're giving these people these tools. And I'm sure our listeners know this. It's not a fix to where you're never going to have these feelings again.
No.
You will. However, you've got the tools in your tool pouch now, right? So I do home improvement, right? I would much rather start taking doors and things off with a battery operated gun than doing the old fashioned way, like
Right.
this, right?
Yeah.
These are the type of tools that he's talking about putting in your belt to start helping you when you do run into those times, because you're teaching them lifelong lessons, right?
Absolutely.
To learn how, okay, next time this happens to you, you start feeling back to where you were feeling before. Oh, wait a minute. I've got a tool that can help me with that. I know what to do to get myself out of it.
And that's exactly right. Having that tool belt or having all of the things you need in the kitchen to put whatever you want to do to eat that night. It's about having those ingredients or those tools that make all the difference. And I think one of the things that are really important is, you were using the idea of taking a screw out. Better to do it with a electric drill than,
right? Than manually.
Yeah. But regardless, the screw never comes out unless you pick up the screwdriver or the drill.
Exactly.
And it's always about, you're exactly right. We need to understand our emotions and we need to understand what to do about them. And one of the things we need to do about them is do something to engage. And that kind of, if you don't mind, it leads me to another perspective.
Please.
When it comes to anything that's kind of in our way, whether it might be, and by the way, I don't think there are any negative emotions. I just think there are warning emotions. If I'm feeling
like
down,
Yeah,
I'm no different than anybody else. I have anxiety about certain things. I get depressed about certain things, not clinical depression, but down or anxious or concerned or worried or whatever, upset, disappointed, mad sometimes. All of those things tell me that something's not working for me. So I call them the warning emotions. It's kind of like a yellow blinking light that tells us slow down. Maybe you need to come to a stop. Maybe you need to look around, figure out what's going on, and then we can proceed safely. And so I always like to say that in the context that all of our emotions serve a purpose. And if we can understand it's not bad or good, it's helping us to move to create a course correction. And in that context, it leads us to what do you do then? And as far as I can tell, there are only 6 options. 4 don't work, 2 do.
okay, I'm curious.
Well, you already know the first 2.
Yes, yes,
It's called fight or flight.
okay, yes.
I call it attack or avoid. And so if I'm upset with my wife, I might give her a dirty look. Well, I'm in attack mode.
Mhm.
Okay. I hope I don't do that very often.
Yeah, right. Well, you're still here, so probably not.
Yeah. It's going on in quite a few years. So
Yeah,
we're,
yeah.
we're good in that regard.
Awesome.
She's been very helpful. So we want to be aware when you're going into any kind of a mode that is kind of interacting with somebody else or even ourselves, getting angry with ourselves, for example, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But the other thing is the other type of that is that flight or avoid. I don't want to deal with this, Margene. That's my wife's name. I'm out of here.
Yeah, yeah, right, I'm gone.
That's avoid. Okay. So we've known about fight and flight for a gazillion years, but psychology stumbled on a third one a few years. I was just reading an article about this. It's called freeze. We learned this from the animal world because sometimes when a predator will take down a prey animal, the prey animal will just go almost like they're dead already. And for the predator, part of the reason why they do what they do is they are engaged in the action, the reaction type of thing. And so they kind of lose interest, especially if they've got a full stomach.
Yeah, right.
And so a lot of times they cease the attack and go on. And then a minute or 2 or 3 later, all of a sudden that prey animal, let's say it's a zebra, will kind of shake himself and
Yeah,
then kind of almost come back to life. Okay, because the predator thought they were dead. Well, let's eat a dead animal. Anyway, well, psychology realized that we do that too. So we kind of freeze things out. We don't want to feel anything. We don't want to deal with anything. It's similar to avoid, but not quite the same. I call it numbing out. And of course, if we're talking about substance, we're talking about avoiding and numbing.
Yes, exactly.
So those are the things that kind of a lot of times go hand in glove. Sometimes it's one or the other, but if we understand that that's fight, flight, or freeze, or numb, attack, avoid, numb. And then the 4th one that we haven't quite figured out yet, but which I think is probably much more prevalent for the vast majority of people. And the 4th one is we attack ourselves. We go after ourselves, we get down that bat, and start beating ourselves up. And it oddly enough gives us a kind of a sort of a little bit of a release. Well, see, I really am a bum, bang,
Yeah, right.
emotionally. And we start to really kind of go after ourselves as if we could punish ourselves out of our problem. Doesn't work. So those are the 4: fight or attack, flight or freeze, flight or avoid, freeze or numb, and the 4th one is to attack ourselves. So those are the 4 that, as far as I can tell, don't work unless somebody's really threatening you in an alley, and then you better run.
Yeah, yeah, right.
That's flight.
That's flight. Yes, that is flight. Yeah.
And again, they have those purposes. They go back to
Well, it's our protection.
yeah,
right?
exactly. That's why we have them there.
Yeah.
So there's only 2 options left. And the first one is to do something to take care of yourself in a positive way. And that just simply means that we ought to have, and I actually work with people, say, I want you to write down 5 things that you can do, totally independent of anybody else, that you've enjoyed and that are positive and supportive for you. So for some people, it's reading science fiction. I can go along with that.
Okay.
For my wife, it's dealing with crafts. She doesn't leave me in the craft room. She goes down and starts sewing up something or whatever she does.
Yeah.
But those kinds of things take care of ourselves and are really important to how we see ourselves, because now we're acting on a positive thing that's going to help. And again, this is that, you're talking about depression.
Hmm.
Well, if a person's really depressed, they may not want to get out of bed. But what they need to do is get out of bed and do something to take care of themselves. One of the weird things is we found that people that are better off mentally and emotionally, they make their bed every day.
Wow.
And you can't get a person that doesn't care about making their bed, you can't get them to believe that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But from my vantage point, it's one thing. I've gotten out of bed, A, B, I just made it. I've just accomplished two things. So it's this idea of, yeah, we're going to be frustrated. Yes, we're going to be down. There are ups and downs in life all of the time. And you're absolutely right. These are not going to go away. But they're telling us that maybe there's something we need to consider. And then once we do that, we need to act on it in some way that works for us. For my wife, going to bed is kind of an interesting thing. She does this, and this. She goes to bed and goes to sleep. Much better than I. Brushes her teeth, takes off her makeup. She likes to read her scriptures.
Yeah.
She gets comfortable. She turns off the light, and that's that. Because all of that is her taking care of herself in the evening. So that's really important. Well, that's number 5. Number 6 is the only other option, and that is to engage positively with somebody else. And that just simply means that we have to have at least 5, and I would say way more than 5 people in what I refer to as our circle of support. That's us in the middle and 5 or more people around us that we know of, that we can trust, that we can rely on, that have our best interest at heart.
Positive influencers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no offense, that's not somebody that we've been in problems with.
Right. Right.
It has to be other people that, basically that we can have a trusting, positive, supportive relationship. And then I always like to add, and I like to have people just write down who those people are. I don't care to see them, but I think they need to recognize that there are people in their lives that care about them, want the best for them.
Mhm.
It might be a minister, it might be their sibling, it might be a good friend from when they're going to high school. It could be anybody,
Yeah.
but people that they can kind of emotionally count on. And then I add one more thing, and that is, if they're in your circle of support, one of the things to consider is whether or not you're in their circle of support, because that mutually supportive relationship, or relationships, I should say, are so important. So those are the 6 options: fight, flight, freeze, numb it out,
Yeah.
or do something to take care of yourself positively, or engage positively with somebody else. We talked about the higher power.
Yeah.
It's a trick question. What is it? And the answer is, it's doing something to take care of yourself, but it's engaging positively with another individual. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
You
It is.
get 2 for 1.
It is a 2-for-1.
Yeah.
And it's, again, it's whatever your higher power is, right? For me, it's God. However, there's other people that are, it's
Yes.
like, no, it's not God for me. It's
No.
the mountain,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
it's a rock, or a crystal, or whatever it is. And that's where their belief is and their faith is at.
Yeah.
And it's working for them. Who are we to say otherwise?
Absolutely.
Right?
I had a good guy that I worked with, and he said, if I'm not out in nature on a hike for 3 or 4 miles, I'm missing something. And I really believe that's important for me. We have this, I was telling you earlier, because I was in the Army, we have an acronym for everything. And one day I was listening to a speaker talk about, he was down in Central America with indigenous population. He spoke Spanish, but he didn't speak this language. And he turned to somebody who spoke both Spanish and this indigenous language, and says, "Your people are at, when they come together, they're kind of connecting with each other in a really kind of a neat way." And the guy said, "Yeah, in our culture, we don't ask, 'How are you? ¿Cómo está?' We ask, 'How is your heart?'" Isn't that a great?
That is.
Wouldn't life be a little more charming if we had a chance to, "Hey, how's your heart today?"
Huh. I
I
like
love
that.
that.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't leave that alone, so we turned HEART into an acronym that stands for health, how we physically take care of ourselves, our emotions, how we work through those emotions, the warning emotions, our awareness or our cognitive abilities to use reason and logic to work through and solve problems. We need both emotions and our ability to reason. So we need both emotions and awareness to bring those two together. We don't want one or the other to overrule. We need both. And then our relationships. And I always like to say there's no such thing as a relationship. So today, you and I know each other. My relationship with you is not the same as your relationship with me, same with my wife and I. But paying attention to how those relationships are working for us. And the last one is kind of this higher power. We call it transcendence, but people call it spirituality. Some people call it the higher power. Some people call it just being out in nature.
Yeah.
And so every day I'm trying to pay attention to all 5 of those ingredients. I need to take care of my health. Nobody can do that as well as I can. Can't rely on the doctor or my wife to, take my vitamins. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
I want to be in the context of a positive emotional experience. And so I'm engaging with other people, and I'm also paying attention to my own emotions. I want to be engaged in terms of awareness or cognitive abilities. My daddy said something when I was a teenager. He said, son, if you're not learning something new every day, you're dead. You just don't know it yet. Well, at my age, I'm desperately trying to learn something every day.
There you go.
And engaging in something that's, enjoyable or it's going to help me understand things better. Certainly relationships with the people. I always say one of the blessings of my particular profession field is I get to interact with people and get to know them and walk with them for just a little while in their lives. And what a blessing that is for me. And of course, there's my family and loved ones.
Yeah.
And then transcendence is anything that lifts me up, that is positive. So I always like to say I go out on a trail for about 4 miles every day. And I almost hit every single one of those. Health,
Wow.
because it's cardio.
Yeah, right.
Emotions, because I'm out in nature. Awareness, I try to pay attention to something that I hadn't seen before. I go the same 4 miles, 2 miles out, 2 miles back, but I look for something I hadn't noticed before. Relationships, because I'm always waving to people, and by now I've known a bunch of people, and they say, "Hey, hi, Gray,"
Yeah.
and I'm saying, "Hey, hi, Connie,"
Yeah.
as they go by on their bicycle, and I'm just trucking along. And then transcendence, because it lifts me up and allows me to have a real positive first part of my day. And again, it's all kind of quote taking care of myself, but also interacting with others in a positive way. They may not know me, and they may not even smile or wave back. I don't care. I feel
Right.
better.
Right.
And maybe a little smile coming their direction wasn't bad either.
Yeah. Well, and it's surprising how much that does for you. So you mentioned hiking a couple times.
Yeah.
I love going hiking too. So I've blown my shoulders out bad and had so many surgeries from all my softball days. And I literally went into tears when I'm like, I'm done. I just cannot do this anymore.
Can't do it anymore.
I've been doing it since I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I played all throughout most of my 50s, right? Until I just couldn't do it anymore.
Right.
And I'm like, what else can I do to get me outside, to get me outdoors? Because for me, ball was all those things, right? Because I'm interacting with people and out there in nature. I've got all this stuff going on around me that I just loved, right?
Right.
Plus the game.
Yes.
Now I go out there and I do my hiking. I'm in nature. I don't know how many times I stop and talk to somebody on a trail that might be resting or something. And a lot of times I'll stop. Are you okay? Oh yeah, just resting, and just we start a conversation. Couple times I've talked to people where we end up knowing the same people, which is flipping crazy, right? It's it's the self-care. And for me, I get more of my spirituality being in those mountains, because I've had some of my best conversations with my higher power.
Yes.
Ever.
Exactly.
I've never gotten it. Okay, that's not a good word. Very seldom have I gotten the spiritual feeling inside of a chapel or somewhere else. But man, up in those mountains, I mean, it's like I'm being hugged, right? You could even my emotions right now, it's like I'm being grasped, I'm being bear hugged. And to me, that self-care means so much. And it has done wonders for me. I mean, seriously, it has changed my life in so many different ways. And by that changing my life, I haven't even realized I've done it. I have changed somebody else's life
Yeah,
because of how I'm seeing things. And it is so cool when someone comes up to you and goes, thank you. I don't know if you realize this, but what you
Right.
said just really got me thinking. And I've been doing this now. Kind of like the feeling you get, right? When you see someone's light go off.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you see them
exactly.
walking out of that
Yeah.
door in light instead of the darkness.
It's
you know, right?
uplifting for you and it's
Oh my
uplifting for
gosh.
others.
Yeah. It's like those in the recovery community. You know, those who have clawed their way out and they're out now helping other individuals
Yes,
in their journey.
exactly.
Not a one of them has ever said, I'm helping them more than they're helping me.
Right.
Not a one. They've all
No.
said, they're helping me more than I'm helping them.
That 12-step works both ways.
Yes.
And the primary benefit, yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And you talked about support earlier too. Just one more thing here is that is something that has completely amazed me of being involved with the recovery community.
Yeah,
I tell you what, the support of all those individuals, whether you were new in the recovery community or you're halfway through or you're a veteran, it doesn't matter. That support is there 100%.
Yeah.
They don't care who you are, what religion, what color your skin is. They don't care what your background is. They don't care if you're rich, poor, middle class. They're there for one reason, and
Yeah.
that's to help you get through with what you're getting through.
talk about
Go
positive
ahead.
interaction with others.
Yes.
It's mutually supportive.
Yeah.
We take a break.
Yeah. You want to take a break?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For-
Yeah, you bet. We're gonna pause here, guys, or just for a second, and we will be right back. So yeah, go ahead. We'll just keep
Do you have a
we'll
restroom?
just keep recording. Yeah, right through here, sir. Oh, see, I was sitting in the chair too long.
Oh, you and me both. You and me both.
Yeah, just right through that door right there,
Oh,
sir.
good. Thank you.
So I'm gonna keep talking while Gray is going to the restroom here. I hope you guys are liking the conversation that we're talking about, because really in my eyes, this stuff is really, really important. And it's just not for those that are in the recovery or in long-term recovery. It's for all of us. You know, as I said at the beginning of the show, I've got a lot of personal stuff going on right now. And a few of my listeners out there, they probably know what I'm talking about. And man, it's been tough. There's been some days where it's been really, really tough. And I've had to fight my way through it, get my way through it, use the tools that I have to really help me. And talk to the right people, right? People who want to be there to support you. And you definitely have to have those. And I'm doing everything I can to use the tools that I have to get me through this time that I'm having right now. So again, guys, keep fighting. Yeah, just keep fighting. Don't give up. And Grace said it. So surround yourself with some amazing people, because there are a ton of amazing individuals out there. And if there's something that's causing your life, something in your life that's dragging you down, do everything you can to get that out of the way. Because once you do, it really, really helps. You know, it's kind of like if you're wanting to hike on the top of a mountain, but yet you're carrying around that 50-pound rock. It's going to make it a lot tougher to get to the top of the mountain. Sometimes it's better just to drop that damn rock to get that weight off you, so you can actually climb that mountain a lot quicker. So Gray is coming back, so we'll continue the show. All right. Okay, come on, start it. Come on, go. Come on, start it. Come on. What? Well, that was a nice little break. I don't have the technology to pause it like we had in the studio. So,
Well,
but anyway, we were talking about, yeah, just the support system and also getting out there in that self-care. And I really do believe, Gray, that self-care is definitely huge, because if we're not taking care of ourselves, how the heck can we expect to dig ourselves out of whatever it is that we're going through.
Yeah. And, this part of self-care and connecting with others, it's all about how we see ourselves different too. So when I'm out doing what I'm doing on my trail run and you're doing out there in nature, you're seeing yourself in a different light. And I'm seeing myself in a more positive, supportive light. One of the things that I love about this is when we're talking about addictions or compulsive behaviors, we're talking about helplessness. But when you're out there in the trail, you're not thinking about being hopeless or helpless.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And likewise with me, and it doesn't solve all the problems for the day. And we're still going to find some issues coming up sooner or later, but we're going to be feeling better about who we are. And that kind of goes back to this idea of key core beliefs. When we talk about those 5 elements of health, emotions, awareness, relationships, and transcendence, all of them are tied back to our beliefs about ourselves. I hate to bring up a sore subject, but I don't know about you, but I very rarely met somebody that was really into some kind of substance or even a compulsive behavior that also wasn't trying to manipulate the truth.
Yeah.
We hide it, we don't share it, we come up with excuses. Sometimes we just flat out lie.
Yeah.
Been there, done that. Okay. So I'm not judging anybody. But every time we do that, then it starts to erode. Am I really honest? Am I really trustworthy? Am I really reliable? Whereas if we do something that counteracts that, so for example, I think all of us spin the truth every once in a while. But we kind of have an awareness that maybe we're doing that. Well, we can back out of that and say, hey, wait a minute, and I said that, but let me kind of qualify that. And now we sense a better concept of ourselves. Our beliefs go back to, yeah, I am honest. I am trustworthy. Yeah, I can recognize when things are not going quite the way I think they ought to. Well, that's true of every element of our life. And I just love the idea that the more that we understand ourselves, become self-aware, and start to deal with that, particularly in the context of relationships, the more we can't help but get a better concept of ourselves as really a person. And that leads me to the most fundamental self-belief that nobody knows about.
All right. Is this like, let's make a deal, door number 1, door number 2?
I always like door number 3.
All right. Yeah. All right.
It's the belief that almost nobody ever recognizes. Brene Brown talked about it in her TED Talk on vulnerability. I always recommend that for almost all of us. I've seen it, 15, 20 times, and I'm still learning stuff. But that central core belief that we don't think about most of the time is I am either worthy or I'm unworthy to love or be loved. And I don't know about you, but I never met anybody with an addiction or a compulsive behavioral pattern that really believed that they were worthy to be loved.
That's why they self-sabotage.
Exactly.
That's exactly why they do it.
Yeah. And that is the most fundamental underlying key core belief. And what we're really trying to get to in terms of changing all of these other beliefs about ourselves that are negative and are beating ourselves up, transforming them is to get back to that most fundamental belief that, yes, I am worthy to be loved. And I'm worthy to love others too. And when that happens, then people, once they lock onto that belief, they're never going back. That is, they may be tempted. They might have, I don't even like the word relapse, but they might make some mistakes. We all do.
Yeah.
But that will bring them back to who they are. I had a woman I'm working with right now, and she says, I've got to reel myself back to who I am. And people say, well, yeah, but how do you, Greg, what's the proof of that? What's the evidence? I said, I can give it to you. And they say, okay, tell me. I said, I want you to think about this circumstance. You're walking down the street one afternoon, and there's a person, it's just you and this other person, they're coming at you. And they step off the street, off the curb, and they misstep, and they fall down hard on the street, and they don't get up. What do? Without hesitation, 99% of the population, that's probably higher than that, will say, well, I'd go see if they need any help, or I'd go check on them, or I'd call 911 or whatever if they needed me. And I said, yeah. And that's the evidence that this is who you are as a caring person that's worthy to be loved. Now, tell me, has that ever not been the case in your life? No. Can you imagine a time in the future where you just won't care when that person falls down and hurts himself? No. That's the most important evidence that we all have, that we are worthwhile, that we're caring, and that we're worthy to be loved. And if we can reel ourselves back to that point every single time, that's the core belief that will feed the other positive core beliefs and make truly recovery something that is, I don't know, glowing,
Right.
for lack of a better. It has a life of its
Yes.
own.
It does.
Well, we get a life of our own.
yeah. That is exactly two, right?
Yeah.
2 in 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, now I had something that was coming up. With what you just said, not feeling worthy enough to love ourselves, right? We cannot give love to other people if we don't have that love inside of ourselves.
Exactly
first.
right.
And I say this in a way, and a lot of our listeners have heard me say this on shows before, and I can't believe my phone's going off, so I usually shut that thing off. For years, I was my wife's therapist during her addiction with alcohol.
Mm.
And now I know why I didn't have the certificate on the wall, because I was a really crappy therapist. Because
Well,
I didn't know anything about addiction, and I didn't know everything she was going through, right?
right.
Plus, how could I help her when I couldn't even help myself during that time? Right? Because I was major confused. I didn't even know what direction to go. So I'm glad that you put it that way, because once we start, and I tell you what, your life will change in so many different ways when you start feeling that self-love. When you start believing who you are as someone that is an amazing person, which you are,
Yeah.
right? You'll start seeing all kinds of amazing things happen. Because when we're feeling blah, and we're feeling down about ourselves, my belief is we continue to attract that type of life into us.
Yes.
When you start changing that, you start attracting that kind of stuff
Exactly.
into your life. And again, that's where it changes. I got something I want to ask you here. When we start figuring out about ourselves, quick little story. When I lost my job, I had a friend call me up. And he was honest with me, told me that he never trusted me.
Mm.
I'd been this guy's friend for years.
Yeah.
I was in shock. I never stole from you. I always
Right.
treated you with respect, family with respect. We always
Right.
had birthday stuff for our kids together. He said I was a liar and a manipulator. I called BS on him. No, I'm not. I thought about it for weeks.
Mm.
And I realized he was 100% correct. I had to learn how to lie and manipulate my way around things, or I got my butt kicked. And I became very good at it. I mastered my skills throughout
Yep.
my growing up, right?
Uh-huh.
I took it into my adulthood, not even realizing that's where I had gone.
Yeah.
I'd done it the majority of my life. So you can change, because in 2009, when my life changed, right, I looked very deep inside me and started going, okay, this is who I don't want to be.
Mhm.
And I started really paying attention to my thoughts. Now, 14, 15 years later, my integrity in that means everything to me.
Yeah.
Everything to me. And it could be blown in 1 second. It's taken me 14 years to get here, and I will continue to go. However, it could be blown in one little teeny mistake, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of that, when I first called BS on that, okay, I now go back and look. That was my ego talking to me. When you have someone come in and ask for help, do you see them battling their ego?
Sure.
I
Absolutely.
mean, to where it's like they're a magnet and you're trying to give them a magnet, and it's that they're really trying to force their way away from it, right? Because their magnets go, their ego's going, no, you're wrong, Doc. No, not at all. I know who I am,
Yeah,
right? Because their ego's not gonna admit that they're not up here, that they're actually
Right.
down here, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of our growing and our learning.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I never have to confront people with that.
Okay,
And the reason for that, as I said, usually within 15 minutes, half an hour, they're telling me something about themselves as how they see themselves negatively.
Okay.
I had a guy come in with me and he says, I'm ignorant. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And I just filed it away first. Well, he said it 3 times in less than 15 minutes.
oh geez,
Well, is that a core belief?
yeah,
Of course it is.
yes,
Yeah. I mean, who wants to be an ignorant person? I don't want to.
yeah,
And so I just allow them to tell me whatever they want to tell me. And so after the 3rd time, I said, I'm just kind of curious. You've mentioned that you're ignorant. And I've heard you say that 3 times in the last little bit of time. Is that what you believe? Well, yeah, that's what I believe. Oh, that's interesting. I give me an example of that. He says, well, I have this job and I'm kind of new to it. And somebody comes up and presents some problem, and I don't have a clue. I'm just plain ignorant. I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, so what do you do about that, if anything? And he said, well, they did give me some resource materials that I can go check out. So I usually go check out these online materials and see if I can figure it out that way. And I said, oh, does that help? He said, yeah, usually, but sometimes I really stumped. And I said, well, what do you do in that case? He says, well, I go ask somebody. And I said, you ask somebody, help me understand that. Well, I asked somebody that's more experienced than I am, and they kind of give me some ideas and some pointers and times between what I've learned and what they're telling me. Yeah, I says, well, then what happens? Well, then I go back and solve the problem. The point is, from his vantage point, it was accurate or true that he was ignorant a great percentage of the time. When in the real accuracy, the real truth is that was total nonsense. That he's a learner, that he's an investigator, that he's a problem solver, that he cares about others. He wouldn't bother with it if he doesn't.
right,
And so it's this idea of understanding and allowing the other person to come to a perspective of what it is they're thinking about themselves, what they're seeing in themselves, what they're believing about themselves. And once it's pointed out to them, then they do their own work to kind of say, wait a minute, maybe I need to expand my perspective on how I'm seeing myself so that I can be more accurate and so that I can recognize that, no, I'm not ignorant.
yeah,
Well, the same thing was true with helpless. You talked about being trustworthy or having integrity.
yeah,
And you
yeah.
say, well, you could blow it and just, yeah, no, you wouldn't blow it. It would be a mistake. And what would you do in that circumstance?
Correct it,
I'll correct it.
yeah, correct
Your
it.
integrity, it depends on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely,
Who hasn't made mistakes? Who hasn't varnished the truth or not told a bold-faced lie?
right,
But we always have the option to recognize it. That's that awareness piece. Then figure out what we want to do as the counter to that, then act on it. And then if it's important for us to keep practicing it, which is exactly what you've done and exactly what I've done. I have the same thing. I had a drug problem. It was all internal drugs. Anger produces some pretty powerful drugs
Yeah.
within us.
yeah, I went to therapy for 6 months to learn how to control an anger issue.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
that's where I started out with domestic violence. But before that, I was the one that had the problem. Okay. And the answer was, I'm helpless. I can't do anything about it. I can't. This is something I was born with the anger gene. That's a bunch of garbage.
Right,
And finally, somebody helped me to kind of work through that. Is that really accurate? Is that the how you see yourself? You know, I was a nice guy most of the time. But the point of the exercise is I believed that until I started to say, wait a minute, that's not accurate. I'm not helpless. I don't have the anger gene, and I can do something if I'm aware of it, act on it in a positive way, and continue to practice it. so that I can move forward that. Do I still get angry? Yeah, of course I do. Not like I used to.
Right.
Okay, but beyond that, the recovery period, if you want to call it recovery, is usually a matter of a couple of minutes, not 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. Yeah, it changes, right? It gets quicker and quicker as time goes.
Yeah, and frequency goes down and duration is much
Yeah.
less.
Yeah. And I had a guest, and gosh, I think I just mentioned this just on a show not too long ago, that was looking at committing suicide because his battle with his addiction, and he just couldn't seem to stop it. And he decided to pray before he took his life. And this voice came across that said basically, why are you not celebrating the days that you haven't? And it stopped him, and he started thinking about it. And he's like, yeah, gosh, I've gone 24 hours before. I've gone a week before. So that's when he realized, instead of beating himself up and putting himself down for the days that he did use,
Yes.
he started counting and celebrating the days that he didn't. And he goes, before he knew it, it was a couple months, half a year and a half, 5 years. It had just completely changed his life. And it was just something, again, that he recognized, right? And started using that to help him in his journey. And yeah, I just did a talk at Red Barn Academy a couple of weeks ago. And I was letting the clients or the students there know that my greatest moments have not come from my greatest moments.
Yeah.
My greatest moments have come from my disasters, my failures, because that's what's helped me grow. And that's what we're all here to do.
Precisely.
Right? Not a one of us that walk this earth are perfect human beings. We've got a lot of flaws, some flaws worse than others. However, we have the tools within us to mend them.
Exactly.
If we choose to. Yeah. Right?
And I think going back to your story a few moments ago, it's where the person changes their focus from what's wrong with them and what's is their problems and all of that, to, can you not take a look at your life when you're having moments of good living, of sobriety, of moving forward in your life in a positive way? That focus is exactly what we're talking about, shifting from the negative core belief focus to the positive core belief focus. And one of the human characteristics that we have is we tend to be investigators and find evidence. And if we come up with a negative core belief, we'll continue to look for the evidence as to why that's true, because that's what we'll focus on.
Well, yeah.
And when we say, look at that in a different way, and wait a minute, is that the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Or is there more to this story about me? Then we start to say, let's change the focus. Let's look for the evidence of who I really am and, how I interact with people in a positive way. You're talking about the situation with you and your wife. You're a crappy therapist, I think.
Yeah, I was a crappy therapist. Yeah.
No, I don't think so. You may not have had all of the skills of, a licensed therapist. I don't know.
Yeah.
The point of the exercise is, what was most important? What was most important for her and what was most important for you is that you cared.
Yeah.
And you were there. You were walking with her, even though you didn't know, and she didn't know, but you were there in trying to be supportive. That's the most important truth.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Someone told me a while ago, matter of fact, it was one of my coworkers, something that's helped him, and he's in long-term recovery, and he's helping a lot of people right now in their recovery. And he goes, Al, what I do every single time now when things happen, good or bad, I stop myself and go, what's the lesson behind this?
Yeah.
So if we stop, like, if we say something negative about ourselves, and that's what we're going to focus on, is because we're going to really make sure we find something negative about ourselves. Instead, stop and go, okay, what's the lesson behind this? Yeah. And I have recently been doing that. And there's times when I've gone, okay, no, I really didn't do anything wrong. I know I didn't do anything wrong during this time. Other times I've thought about it and went, I got it. I could have said what I said in a totally different way. I could have my facial expressions could have been different. You know, so again, what can I learn from everything that happens in my life?
Yes,
Instead of beating myself up over it or trying to let my ego sneak in and basically build that wall to protect myself, what can I learn behind this thing? Because if I can figure out what to learn, I've just put another step above where I was at before. And again, I'm a true believer that's where we continue to just
yes,
escalate. And will we ever get where we're supposed to go? We may reach goals and things. No, we won't. I'm a firm believer that I will work on myself until the day God calls me home.
amen.
You know, there's always something to learn. There's no way we can know everything. There's
No.
no way. So,
And
Yeah.
in fact, the older I get, the more I recognize how much I don't
right.
know. And then I'm really concerned about what I don't know that I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But
it
that's
happens.
that's the exciting part of life's journey, is to continue to grow and learn. And you know, if the little kid learning to walk, you know, pulled themselves up to the chair for the first time and stood there wobbling, and then kind of let go and tumble. Well, if that's what the end was, you'd never really be able to go beyond that.
All of us would still be crawling around on all fours.
Exactly, exactly right.
Yeah.
But doing what you're doing now is just exactly what we're talking about, being aware of something, understanding, man, maybe there's something to learn about this. If there is, great. If there's not, okay, that's fine.
Mhm.
But if there is, yeah, how can I adjust? And then how can I act on that? And then how do I put that into my life to make it a part of how I live my life, my practice of it?
Yeah.
And it's pretty doggone exciting. I don't know about other people, but I'm still looking for what's beyond the next bend in the river, because I don't know
Right.
what's there. But
Yeah.
I'm anxious to find out.
Yeah. Yeah. When I talk to God, that's what I ask. Like, I wish you'd at least give me a clue where I'm going. But I know you won't. I just got to put my faith in you. However, I'd sure like to have maybe a little peek of what's around the corner.
Well,
Well, guess what? He wants me to go around the corner.
yeah,
you know.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you find out.
Then I find out. Yeah.
And then I find out.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I want our listeners to know. So Gray bought me this book. I don't know if you guys can see that, The Key Core Beliefs, which is exactly what we've talked about in this show. What got you to write this? I mean, you've had to have known how important this stuff is, and right, you can reach more people through this
Yes,
than you can that's coming through your office doors.
exactly right. And I still love the people that come through my office doors.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to give that up, but the long and the short of it is that's precisely why the three of us got together and over the space of 2 years put this book together in the context of how we see people seeing themselves and what they truly believe about themselves. And you know, we say in the book that some of our beliefs are pretty straightforward. So, for example, I'm honest or I'm dishonest. That's a pretty simple.
Yeah.
But other beliefs, well, we talked about one of them. I'm worthy to be loved. Well, most people don't even think about that, but it's still a belief, one
Mhm.
way or the other. So some of these are up there where we can see them. Others are just down below the surface. I have an example of that, by the way, if you don't mind.
No, please share.
I was talking with a friend of mine who's also a clinical mental health counselor, and Frank and I were just chatting and on the phone, and I said, you know, Frank, yes, how are things going? And I said, well, they're going pretty good, but you know, I've been a little bit off the last 2 or 3, 4 weeks. I don't know what it is. It's just kind of something that's niggling. And he said, well, sounds like a belief to me. And I said, oh, come on, Frank. Come on. And he says, well, you know, think about it. I said, well, I've thought about it. I can't think of any belief. He said, well, you know, it's there. You can bring it to surface. You can bring it to life. Okay. And I said, okay, well, maybe. So he says, what's been going on? I said, well, you know, life, normal, so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me that one of the things that had happened a few times, more than a few times, was my wife would say something to me that was so patently obvious a 3-year-old would understand it. And I always respond back to her, what do you think I am, stupid? And as soon as those words came out of my mouth, that was it. I mean, Frank didn't have to say anything. That was the belief. And no, I'm not a stupid person. At least I
Right.
hope not.
Right, yeah.
And I learned and worked through things, but that belief was coming. And by the way, I know exactly where that came from. And it was way back in my childhood and teenage years. Okay. Doesn't make any difference where it came from. What are you going to do about it now? Well, one of the things I'm going to do about it was funny because Margine would kind of react to that. You know, she get a little upset when I
Yeah,
say that.
yeah.
You know what? I never have to say that ever again. And yeah, there are going to be times when my wife's going to say something to me that's pretty doggone obvious, but she's just trying to clarify something. Doesn't have anything to do with my brains or my
Right.
stupidity or whatever intelligence. It's just, oh, okay. So, and all of a sudden that's never come up. Now, there have been times when I kind of went on the verge of thinking it, but then I pulled myself back and I've never uttered those words again. And it's a classic example of how some beliefs, core beliefs, are sitting there just below the surface, and we're not aware of them. Once they become aware of them, then we can shift and go in a positive direction and deal with it effectively, just as you have done that in
Yeah.
your life and so many others. And it really is, this is a rocket science.
And seriously, it's not, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't even think it sounds more difficult than this, because really it's not. It's like my one buddy told me, he's like, it's as easy, just think of all these billions of neurons we have in our head, right? It's just as easy in going and unplugging your vacuum out of an outlet that's all loose. It doesn't work good for you, and plugging in one that's a little tighter,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
It's just, you're just reprogramming, because that subconscious mind, it's still in there.
Yeah. Of
That's
course it is.
still in there. It'll
Of
never
course it
go
is.
away, but you've buried it far. And it only takes one little nanosecond to surface again, because that's
Right.
how our subconscious works.
Yep.
That's just, it's protecting ourselves. That's all it is a protecting mechanism, if I'm understanding things
That
correctly.
is correct.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up too, because I've taken some words out of my vocabulary, and I'm working on some others, like the but.
Mhm.
However, it can be used in a positive way as well.
I can.
The word hate, that to me
Mhm.
is so, that and shut up, and
Yep.
those are some of the most disrespectful things, because hate is a strong word,
It is.
a strong word. And I've mentioned this to a few people myself, where I've said, even if you say, I hate how these shoes feel on my feet,
Mhm.
you're
Yep.
still bringing
Yep.
that into you,
That's
right?
right.
Even though it's as innocent as it is.
Yeah.
Do your best. You can just say, I don't like wearing these shoes because they're very uncomfortable.
Right.
It's a much better way of saying it than
Yes.
I hate something, right?
Oh, it
Yeah.
makes all the difference. And I'm like you. There are certain words that I've really tried to take out of my vocabulary. Hate is one of them,
Mhm.
by the way. The other one that I find quite interesting is expectations.
I've not heard that one.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I got intrigued by a lot of people having a lot of expectations of others. So, for example, if I have an expectation of my wife, what I'm really saying is, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to do it. This is when you need to do it. And if you don't, what is the result?
You're going to be upset.
I'm going to be upset, disappointed, resentful, whatever. Okay. Well, there's nothing wrong with having good desires. There's nothing wrong with communicating what you would like, but it's a different flavor when I put an expectation on it. And so many people do that. And when we talked about we're never going to be perfect, there's so many people that are going around that they have to have an expectation of this and an expectation of that, not only of others, but of themselves.
Yeah.
And then when they don't meet that expectation, or the other person doesn't meet that expectation, then it's some disappointment, some resentment, some frustration, either with them, the other person, or with themselves. And if it's with themselves, they take out the bat and start to emotionally beat themselves up. So, as far as I can tell, looking through the Bible, for example, God never uses the word expectation. If he doesn't, why do I need to?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And so my point is, it's fine to communicate what you'd like. It's fine to have good desires. It's good to have goals and objectives. Nothing wrong with any of those. But it's like that. I hate how these
Yeah.
shoes. You start to bring in negative concepts that are really problematic, and we don't even know they're problematic. But in a lot of people's lives, expectations are ruining so much of their daily interactions. Again, somebody said, I should be studying my Spanish more. Well, okay, it's good to have an interest in and a desire to learn another language. But if you're going to just sit there and beat yourself up about it, then it's not doing you any good at all.
Don't shit on yourself, right?
Exactly. Or anybody else.
Or anybody else. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Great. Gosh, this show has been, I could sit here and talk to you for another hour at least, and I don't want to take up more of your time. Is there something that you would like our audience to gain from this show, or do you have a main message you'd like to share before we end this?
Well, obviously, I hope that everybody can understand how important these beliefs are. They're influencing every aspect of our lives. Our beliefs come out of our childhood or teenage years. Our adult years are still growing and developing. If they're positive, they're predominantly constructive core beliefs. People are in a place of feeling pretty good about who they are, and that's really, really crucial. But if they're predominantly negative core beliefs, then that'll affect every aspect of their lives, how they perceive things, how they think about things, how they emotionally respond to things, and then what they do in terms of their behaviors and actions. So it's really, I think, crucially important to pay attention to them. We talked a little bit about heart, that you pay attention and take care of your health, and you're aware of your emotions, that they're not negative emotions, but if there's something that's a warning emotion, you pay attention to that and you do a little bit of a course correction. You're aware of how you move forward in awareness and in context of learning, growing, exposing yourself to positive ideas or experiences, and becoming just more aware of yourself in the context of your life and in the context of others. And then that leads to creating ever more positive or constructive relationships with others. The more we see ourselves in a positive life, just as you were talking about earlier, the more we're going to be appealing to others. And they're going to be more appealing to us. And we're going to have better interactions. We can work through almost anything if we practice a little empathy and try to understand the other person and really become aware of where they are by hearing them and trying to understand and leaving out all of the judgments. You just don't need it. One of the things that I was just hearing a talk the other day is we constantly are comparing ourselves with others. And what does that do? Well, it leads to either judgments or pride. And by the way, that goes both directions. We can compare ourselves with others who are not as good as us or better than us. And either way, it doesn't work. The idea is, somebody said, get off the ladder of comparison and pride and get down with the rest of the human race, because we've all got our fair share of challenges, problems, opportunities, gifts, and blessings. And let's share that together and enjoy that in the context of relationships. And then I think, for me at least, and I think all of us, we need those transcendence in our lives in terms of experiences. It might be reading good literature. It might be out there on the trail.
Yeah.
For both of us.
Yeah, for both of us. Yeah.
Or it could be any of I had talked to somebody. I said, "What do you like to do?" She says, "I'd like to just kind of go for a drive and look around." She's not going with anybody else. That's something that gives her that kind of sense that there's more to life than just her issues, challenges, and opportunities. That there's something that transcends who she is as an individual and lifts her up. So I like to say, if we pay attention to those, then we're going to, as the old Indian proverb said, feed the good wolf instead of the bad wolf. Are you familiar with that one?
Yes. Yeah. I had a guest on the show that talked about that.
Yeah. And so we're going to feed the good side of ourselves, and we're going to live better lives. We're going to live healthier lives, and we're going to live lives that are full of greater emotional sense of peace. May not be always happy and joyful, and there are still going to be ups and downs, as we talked about today. But we're going to bring ourselves back sooner rather than later to who we really are, as caring, considerate, understanding individuals worthy to be loved.
Man, that was a great main message. I love that. Yeah, you nailed it right there.
I keep trying to reel myself back to
Yeah, right. Well, and like you said, we all need to reel ourselves back here.
Yes,
You know, because yeah, sometimes we loosen up the drag and we allow ourselves to go a little further down the river than what we really need to.
right.
And it's just as easy as let's bring us back in.
Bring
So I
ourselves
love
back
that.
in.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. How can people find your book? Again,
Uh,
there it is, guys.
If you look up Key Core Beliefs on Amazon.com, it's there for less than $20.
Okay.
And it's got the physical copy edition, but it also has the online edition if somebody wants to haul it around in their cell phone or iPad or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, I always like to point out that it really begins with this idea of heart. So right out the beginning is this concept of there's our health, emotions, awareness, relationships, and transcendence. And then I kind of, one of my favorite things about the book is at the back, it basically has a one-page summary, and I've not paid too much attention to it. But it is this idea that everything that's basically contained in the book is in this one-page summary, way back on page 250, if I remember correctly. And then the only other thing I'd like to add, if it's okay,
Absolutely.
we kind of call this the life quality spectrum. I don't know if you can see that. And I think we're on that 24/7. And what is that spectrum? Well, on one end, it's shame, fear, and isolation. We're alone. We're ashamed of ourselves. We have these deep-seated fears about who we are. On the other end of that spectrum, the one that goes towards the light is empathy or understanding, caring, and connection. You talked about the power of the group, for example.
Yeah.
Don't you feel that when you go there, you're feeling like somebody really understands you and cares about you, and that you're connecting with them and they're connecting with you? And you're doing all of that in the other way around. The power of that, whether it's taking care of ourselves individually or whether we're doing something in a positive interaction and relationship with others, that gets us to the light. The isolation, the disconnection is in the darkness. So let's go towards the light.
I love it. Let's go towards the light. And a lot of you guys know the opposite of addiction is connection,
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So that is huge. Making the connections and again being around the right people make a ton of difference. Gray, my gosh, this has been an awesome show. And I mean that seriously. This has been really good. I could sit here and talk with you another hour because I love getting in conversations like this because I get to learn so much. And my brain sometimes can be a little slow. So when I go back and I listen to the shows, it's like, oh, that's right. I remember that. And so great information with what you shared with our listeners today. And this is stuff that hopefully our listeners will take away and go, okay, I'm going to start implementing some of these in my life, right? Because again, it will change. I guarantee that your life will change. Just pick one. You know, you don't have to pick all five, all six, all at the same time, right? Just start with one. Start with one positive thing that you heard today that you want to work on it. And then once you start getting a little comfortable with that, pick another, right? Because sometimes we have a tendency when we're wanting to learn something, we're trying to take in all this information at once, and it doesn't work. At least it doesn't for me.
Nope.
I'd rather just start somewhere. And then once I feel like I've got a pretty good hold of it, I'll start somewhere else, and I'll just like grabbing a ladder, just one rung at a time. So thank you, Gray.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. I hope we didn't keep you from anything.
No.
We got started a little late and we've been going pretty long. Thank you.
It's been a real privilege, and thanks so much for inviting me out. It's
Absolutely.
really been terrific as far as I'm concerned, and thanks for your passion. And thanks to all of you out there. You are making a difference in so many lives. And I think we were talking earlier that sometimes we don't have an understanding of how much of an impact we are in influencing others to live better lives and to enjoy their lives more fully.
Amen. Yeah, I'll ditto on that one, or I'll second the motion or third the motion, whichever way you guys want to take it. Again, great, thank you. And thank you to all our listeners, all our sponsors, all our guests, all our guest co-hosts. I mean, you guys hear me say this every single show. This show wouldn't happen if it wasn't for you guys. Because seriously, I just sit here, I just host, I have a platform. The rest of you guys are the ones that's really doing all the work and sharing a ton of great information. So we love and appreciate you guys. And before we sign off, up until our event, I'm going to put a plug in every single week. Don't forget our Healing Utah Success Summit on Saturday, October 7th at the Miller Free Enterprise Building. Go to rooshrecovery.com, get your tickets. They're only $34, very inexpensive. It's from 1 to 6. We've got Curtis Marsh that's going to be speaking. His nickname was Chaos. Put the two together, you'll get it. My friend Mallory Roosh, you've heard me talk about her. She's got a phenomenal story. Brad Neufeld. We've got John Apsey, who was the former Jazz Bear, Utah Jazz Bear mascot. He's going to be MC in the event for us. I will also be speaking. And guys, if you came to our last one, you're not going to hear the same stories again. There might be little similarities, but all of us are working on coming up with something different to talk about. So guys, please come out and see us. You will definitely be inspired. I know that you will, because we inspired a lot of people at our April event. Guys, remember this: addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out. All right. This is still going to be recorded, but since I don't have a producer to help me with this stuff, there we go. And I don't edit or cut. So, let's go.